And so SCAR stands for Stop the Broken Feelings and Thoughts. See, courageously then calm that fear within you. Then allow connectivity with other people. Allow people to talk to you. Allow people to help you. And then together, collaboratively, you reinvent the plan and you take the first step.
Yes.
And then what you have to do, which is really critical, is you have to tell everybody, share your story. Because once you share your story, you begin to feel so empowered. You begin to feel beautiful.
Welcome back to another edition of From Crisis to Creation here on Mentory TV. I'm Patricia Falco Beccalli, your host. But today, I'm really excited because for the first time, we are going to combine whatever happens within us to the organizational ecosystem. Sounds very mystical, but we're going to talk about the art of scars, healing organizational culture, climate, and character. And that is a book authored by Dr. Kathy J. Hagler. And Kathy is joining us today on Mentory TV. Kathy, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's so great to be here. I really am delighted that you've invited me to talk about this mystical relationship between the human body and the organization.
Absolutely. And we drill right deep into the issue because there's a million facets, but it does make sense. But before we do that, let me just quickly introduce you and your persona, what you have done over this, over your career over the last few years, and to our viewership. So you are an expert in organizational development, also known as the organizational healer. You do focus on leadership science, and that means you enter organizations and really kind of work with them as a partner through good times and bad times, and especially bad times to make them good again. And this is something that we focus on. And you have been coached, mentored, and also worked with a couple of the gurus when it comes to quality management, organizational quality. Dr. Edward Deming, the father actually of quality and quality management, and Dr. Peter Drucker, the father of modern management. You have a degree, an MBA, but what really makes my heart pound, Kathy, is that you are a pianist. You're a real artist. And then you're also a yoga teacher. I mean, is there anything you don't do? Oh, yeah, authoring books. And that is the piece of glory we're going to discuss in depth today. The art of scars, as I just said, healing organizational culture, climate, and character. And it came out at the end of September 2021. Now, first question, of course, is in the book you say, on the subject of scars, my scars became my wings. Usually scars are something that we hide away, we put makeup on, we are not proud of, we really try to cache.
Early on, I really learned that I had a lot of scars. As a little girl, I learned that I had mental scars, I had physical scars. By the age of 6, I had cancer, and I had a big scar on my arm, and I would go to school and people would laugh at the scar because it was unusual for little kids, and so I'd wear long sleeves. And then one day somebody said, "Well, can I see it?" And so I pulled down my thing like this, and I said, "See the scar?" And they said, "Wow, can I touch it?" And so I let them touch it. And so I decided that could be a business at 6 years old. So I started charging $0.25.
Well, that is a very shrewd businesswoman you became there. Okay. So you want one quarter.
That's right. So what I learned is that I was unique. And once I learned as a little girl that I was unique, and that was okay. And that this scar made me unique. It made me beautiful. It made me different. And so I was beginning to see that I could rise above the things that really I felt hurt me.
Well, what I think is interesting, it doesn't only make you different, but it made you attractive because people wanted to see it and wanted to touch it, and they were intrigued by it because yet you were always Kathy, but somehow transformed, and that made you something more.
That made me different. And what I found as I grew is that if I focused on my uniqueness and my differences and did not let them drag me down, then what I could be is I could go on to the next step. There's a thing I like to talk about, Patricia, that's called liminal space. And what I learned is that you have a time before scars, before you're hurt. And then all of a sudden you have a pain, you have a wound, and you step into this thing like a river. And this river is really flowing and it's really scary. And then when you put both feet in it, you don't know where you're going. It's kind of like you just got to stay with the water. And if you stay with the water and the flow in this anxious space as you heal, you come out on the other side and you're more beautiful.
But to understand that,
you have to understand it. And I think one of the things that I began to learn over time was one of my favorite C words is courage. You know, you can't stop. You can't just fold your wings in. But what you have to do is let them go. You have to be able to fly. And you have to have that courage to know that on the other side, you'll be beautiful.
But that is almost wisdom. And I always say to my daughter, you know, try to turn a wound into wisdom. But there is an adult talking to a teenager. If you haven't had that kind of...
Good luck.
Right? Sorry.
Good luck.
You see, but unless you know that A, you're broken, B, you can heal, and see that healing doesn't only just happen. And time does not heal necessarily wounds. There is a system, there is a process, and there is a certain kind of consciousness to it that makes the healing maybe uncomfortable, but at the end, beautiful. And that kind of consciousness is not necessarily dispersed, I don't think, Kathy.
I don't think it is either. And I don't think people understand that the hurts. I mean, I don't think they understand the human mind, you know, that hurts occur in our subconscious. And there's a famous picture of an iceberg with everything, all the iceberg underwater and just a little on the top. All of that underwater is your subconscious. And if I'm pointing down to my stomach, it's almost like I think of the subconscious as being down there. You know, it's down there, and what it is, it's programmed from early on. And so things bother us and they wound us. And until we can bring them into our consciousness, which is that little tiny piece above the water, we're not able to heal. And it doesn't happen like that. You have to be with it, and you have to, like you said, there's a process. And my book is about the process. So I have two parts. The reason I named it Art of Scars is because there's an art in what I looked like afterwards. I looked unique with my scar. But there's also a way I had to get there. And so what the book is about is how do you get there? Not only as an individual who has those breaks in your subconscious, but also as an organization. And all organizations have breaks. So how do you get there?
Exactly. And I think there where I also felt after our first briefing call, Kathy, you know, and then really digging into the book, I just thought this book was you all over. From the little that I know, but it was a Kathy personal and it was a Kathy professional, totally combined, which really is the actual intriguing part. And here, not everybody might know what this actually is, this vase, and the art of Kintsugi. Why don't you actually tell us how this link happened, where you started seeing a personal process being extremely applicable to the organizational world?
Well, you know, I sort of knew that in my heart. As I worked with organizations, I knew they were broken. Usually as a consultant, you get called in when they're broken. And so I would get called in, and then I started to begin to see, well, that's like me, you know, and it's like all my friends that have these wounds. But I hadn't put it together until one day I saw online a Kintsugi vase. And I thought, wow, look at that. It's a broken vase that's been healed with gold. And I thought, what a wonderful metaphor. A vase that was broken into many pieces and healed with gold. That's what happened to me. I was broken into many pieces and I healed with gold. I think another word I would say is I can heal with gold. You don't have to heal. And that's the way. You have to understand there's a way to go to heal. And so that's why I thought the Kintsugi vase is a perfect model of something that's broken and then healed.
So where does the gold come from? Is that the subconscious being dug up into the conscious level that you then can start going through the healing process step by step?
Oh, what a wonderful question. Yes, the gold is made up of, there's a thing that happens in your subconscious. Let me give you an example. I was with a friend recently, and she did some things that hurt my feelings. And so what I had to notice inside myself is that I have a wound in there. And people don't recognize you have this wound. But you begin to feel it, and you can feel that it's like something that's not quite right. You feel it all over your body. That's what's beautiful about normal yoga, is it's mind, body, and spirit. You feel this wound. And so what I began to do is I began to take this wound, and I looked at it and said, why is this making me feel so bad? You know, there's really nothing to this. It's just a little thing that makes me feel so bad. Then I went back and I remembered that my dad died when I was really young. And I remembered that I felt really abandoned. And I remembered that abandonment made me feel like the best way to deal with abandonment is just to say, these people are dead. They're never coming back. And so I realized in my life that what I had done is I made people dead. You know, I made people like they disappeared if they hurt my feelings. And so I thought, oh my goodness, here's my friend that did this one little tiny thing. And I'm saying, you know, you're dead to me. And so I actually took that. I took that thing. I took that piece, that thought, that feeling I had in my subconscious about my dad. And I said, let's look at this. And I examined it. And what I did is I mixed it with some gold paste. And I said, so what is it really? It really is my hurt feeling. It really has nothing to do with what she did or my dad. He didn't die on purpose.
It was all in you. It was all in you.
It was all in me. It was all in me. So if I could take that feeling and I could bring it into consciousness, I could turn it into a wound that was healed with gold. So now I get it. I get that when I feel like I want to run away, what I feel like is I can just feel that in with gold. I remember that, you know, it was all in me. And I have now healed my wound. And do I still feel that tug? Yeah, I feel the tug, but now I know, wait a minute, I can heal that with gold. And the gold is my gold. The gold is my thought to feeling to action. I no longer have to do that. I no longer have to run away.
Well, but the interesting part here is that the running away, when something happens, you know, you either fight as fight, flight, or freeze reaction to something that we see is threatening. And of course, if somebody says something triggers any kind of, you know, emotion, it's a reaction. And so the three types of reaction I just mentioned, and the system that you are proponing here is just, hang on, I know where this is coming from. And instead of reacting, you're acting. You're saying, no, I'm going to kill her off. She's been a great friend. And what does she have to do with my wounds? I need to deal with whatever has gone on, and I dug into my subconscious. And as you also say in your book, 95% of whatever we do, we say, how we act, is really triggered, guided by the subconscious. Even though we think we make rational decisions, we do not.
That's really true. And I think your question was wonderful, because I think the goal is being able to take that hardwired knee-jerk reaction that would be fight or flight or freeze and turn it into love. That's the goal. Yeah. Because it's really all in you. And the wound is really fear, false evidence appearing real. It really didn't have anything to do with my dad dying a long time ago.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the interesting thing in this kind of situation, also with your friend, that's any kind of situation we actually encounter, is that, and also Sadhguru, and I know you follow him, we follow him together, and he really is a guru in the sense of, Jesus, I wish I had known this when I was 5. Okay, I would have had maybe a very different life by now. But he clearly says,
"Oh, you would be an angel by now."
Yay! 111. There you go. Angel numbers. And he says, really, the only things you can 100% influence is your thoughts, your emotions, and your body. So really is the reaction to the outside world. And the outside world, you can hardly at all influence. Albeit, you can do it with your reactions. And I think this is what you were just saying, what comes out. The gold is the love. Now, let's kind of develop this thought and put it into the corporate context. Because, Kathy, I mean, you're an organizational development expert. You know that it is talking about vulnerability, being able to break, have been broken, having issues, being triggerable, provocable in a corporate context, being, vulnerable, whatever. It's just not compliant. It's just not professional. It's something that usually corporations don't deal with. On the other hand, we are all individuals. We are kind of this cumulative subconscious entity that actually makes whatever we call a company, a corporation, or an entity, that is operating on a professional level. Take us through this transition from what we are and what we can influence as an individual and what we actually take into work literally every single day.
Well, and this was just so magic for me, because what I realized is that as individuals, we have this subconscious that's 95% of everything we do. So when people say, our culture is our values, well, that's really kind of lightweight. Our culture is all of our people, and they're 95% subconscious minds. And if you think about that, and if you think about just your subconscious mind, and I think about just mine, that gets pretty scary. So if you put 1,000 people together in a culture and all of their subconscious minds doing knee-jerk reactions, no wonder organizations break. Yeah. And so what I wanted to figure out is, okay, with that in mind, how do we help the people in the organization recognize how they're broken, and then find that in Kintsugi, you have to find that big piece of the vase, the piece that really fits in first.
The core issue.
The core
what is
issue.
Like the most rotten thing?
What is the most, right. And so once you find that big piece that's broken, by looking at all the individuals, and I use an assessment tool that really measures culture, that's amazing. And then they can say, well, here's my piece, and here's my piece, and here's my piece. But the big piece, so let's say the big piece is, I'll give you an example. The big piece is fear of being laid off. Mm-hmm. They all have this deep, deep fear about being laid off. I was working with a very large corporation in San Francisco, and they were told that for the very first time in history, and they were 75, the company was 75 years old, they were going to give out green slips, yellow slips for being laid off. And everybody they just got really afraid. And so we had to find that really one big piece and say, how do we deal with that fear? And by the way, at the end, nothing happened. Everybody kept their job. So it was false evidence appearing real. But once you instill that fear, then everything shuts down. And so my job has been to figure out, how do you assess the culture? How do you assess those big pieces in the culture? And then armed with that knowledge, work with the organization as a whole to bring that into light and talk about it. So let's all talk about this. What can we do so that we won't have to have any layoffs? And you know what? They did it. It's amazing. They did it. What can we do together? And in my model, what I say is, find that big piece. Stop the broken thoughts. bring it up to your consciousness. And once you do that, then get together, connectivity, connect as a group, because the difference with an organization is you've got each other. You've got the power of all those powerful minds to come together and innovate and say, let's make this work together. And it works like magic, Patricia. So if you can get them to see that, and that coming together and then working this problem together, you'll not only survive, but guess what?
Yes.
It's wrong.
Absolutely. And there are so many points that you touch on I would like to pick up on. And this kind of drawing together rather than not. You call it, don't struggle together, but snuggle together, especially in a crisis situation. And the entire mindset shifts that, hey, we are in this boat together. We have a cumulative complex fear within us as a workforce, as a team or whatever, instead of kind of, okay, who's going to be the survivor? And
one point I want to add, they have a choice.
Yes.
See, they have a choice. And that's what, once they get in the boat together and start snuggling, they'll know they have a choice. They haven't figured out they have a choice.
Yeah, but that's exactly the conscious part. You see? That's the conscious part, because only when you go like, okay, when, for example, when Victoria's like, oh, I don't know what to do, everything is overwhelming, and that's, her fear coming out that she won't be able to do whatever she has to do. So I try with a very simple sentence, A, what is your alternative? And B, you always know where the door is. And that is kind of giving her the choice. You either continue, and it's not going to be easy, but this is your choice, or where the door is, then this is your choice. And that frees her up in 1 second, which I think is quite interesting. And that can happen on a corporate level. That's the first thing I wanted to pick up on, which is beautiful. So this choice that needs to be happening in a conscious level. Okay, let's not struggle. Let's stop fighting. Let's just try not to kumbaya, but let's try to kind of, we admit we are afraid, and we admit we all are afraid. That's connectivity. And that really can glue together.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, you mentioned corporate culture. Everybody has a corporate culture. Then you named the 3 C's in your book, which I thought was more pivotal than anything, because I don't think most people are aware. You name culture, climate, and character of an organization. Why don't you just take a couple of seconds and define the differences, slight differences, and also the reciprocal relationship, especially between culture and climate?
Okay, I'm going to do this in terms of the body of a computer. So a computer, because we all know that lately because we're getting very familiar with it. A computer has a lot of software. The software is your subconscious. It's gotten programmed. That's the culture. So the software is the culture that's gotten programmed into each of us as children. So the culture is made up of our beliefs. It's made up of our habits. It's made up of, just as simple as how we drive to work, or how we decide that we're going to walk to work or bike to work. But it's made up of all of those things that make us who we are. That's the culture. And it's all put together in an organization of beliefs and habits, and all hardwired. It's in there, and it's part of our program. Okay, that's the culture. 95% of our program. Okay, back in there. And I love this. The consciousness is really the way we get things done. So if you think about culture, those are your thoughts and your feelings. And the consciousness is your communication and your behavior. So the consciousness is the way you get the work done. It's it's the things you are doing. So it's what people see, it's what people do, it's the choices you make, it's your intentionality, but it's those things you actually make decisions about. And what's scary is that the subconscious is 1,000,000 times more powerful than the consciousness. So what you have to do is you have to actually have a vision of saying, okay, I want to go over there. And I tell organizations to look at a Kintsugi vase. Look how it's broken and filled in with gold. So you're broken and you want to go over there. And you've got all of this powerful thing going on in your culture, these beliefs and these habits and all these problems. You want to give people the will to say, we don't have to do that because we want to go over there. So what's the character? Well, in computer language, and I really love it, I wanted to just read this to you. In computer language, it's called the kernel. Mm-hmm. Kernal, like a kernel of corn. Mm-hmm. But what the kernel is the connection. It's the heart.
Oh, okay.
So what happens is that our heart is the connection between our consciousness and our subconsciousness. So we have those thoughts and feelings, and it starts getting into our heart. And if we can then ask our heart, is this what's really right for me? Is this right? And we know we have no more feelings of brokenness, then we can move it into our consciousness. So when you look at culture, climate, and character, the culture is your subconscious, the climate is your consciousness, and the character is the way you make it work.
Yes. Yes.
It's your operating system.
It's the operating system, and that's actually part of your organizational character model, where character is always in the middle of the wheel. And I think if you read this book, everybody, you will see there are many, many illustrations of the actual philosophy, and not only the philosophy, but really the how to do and implement. This is why I think it's such a fundamental book. And just on the point, Kathy, what you were saying, that the habits are definitely, and the system of an organization can really do something to the individuals. And there was a very good quote at the beginning of chapter 10 in your book by Edward Demings, and he said, "A bad system will beat a good person every time." Now, I thought that was interesting, because I'm thinking, okay, we are all broken somehow. We all had traumatic experiences in our childhood. Happened to you, it happened to me. And, I'm turning 52 soon. I'm just thinking, gosh, and I'm still thinking about those things. I'm still working those things out that happened to me when I was 7. Jesus. What is going on? So I'm thinking now, also, having my own company and working with a team together, even in the hiring process. If I am an entrepreneur and I start up my own business, even knowing that I will, of course, have people working with me, and it's going to be a patchwork of different beliefs, traumas, fears, triggers that I'm bringing onto one ship, and trying to, out of these broken characters, really create something beautiful and whole that will be long-lasting. Is there something that we can already do in the hiring process? Is there a system, a model, a scanning, a metrics roster that we can filter these people through, that more or less the fears and the beliefs and the traumas are kind of almost aligned, that the chaos, the potential brokenness of a corporation long term might be less probable or less deep?
I believe that's a great question. And I think that if an organization has gone through the process of looking at what is your big piece that's broken, and based on that, what are those pieces of your character in your operating system, those values, those things like trust, honesty, respect, responsibility? What are those key character things that you want in those people? And to me, if you can look at your hiring process, it's not just being one person talking to people, but having your group, again, snuggle together. Having your group really look at, what are we looking for? We're looking for trust. We're looking for honesty. We're looking for respect. And figure out their way of talking to the people to figure out what's the best kind of person that we can have here. Now, is it going to be fail-safe? No. Because you know what? No one knows what's stuck in our subconscious, even us.
Yeah.
And we don't know what's stuck in that person's subconscious, but at least if you start out by saying, what are those character pieces that we're really going to hire for? What are those pieces? Then I believe that you're so much farther ahead. It's not just about, and this is a great question, because it's not just about, do you have that skill? Are you a good accountant?
Exactly.
But the other question is, not only are you a good accountant, but are you good in relationships?
Who are you? Who are you? Who are you?
As Sadhguru says, and I love him, but as Sadhguru says, it's about who are you and you knowing who you are. And I mean, to me, what a wonderful question to ask somebody in an interview. I mean, going through Sadhguru's programs twice, I really saw him. I mean, he really pumped that in our heads about who are you? And I would love to hire people who say, here's who I am. Here's who I am. And we know that they may not all know all of it, but if they know part of it, we're miles ahead.
Even if they're only open, Kathy, even if they're only open to the question consideration, you know,
so
I mean, because there's so many people that just don't want to. They just don't want to. They function, they robot. Hey, we've got our basic needs and we're going for that, and everything else is self-development. And why should I? You know, it's that.
No,
that's
you're right. You're right. And they can't. You know, if some people, they're so passive and they're so afraid.
Yes.
And what they've done is stuffed all those feelings in their subconscious. And they found a way to just never admit who they are. That's not what you're looking.
And I wonder to what extent I can actually find that already out within, you know, the first conversation, second conversation with a team. I mean, we in our team at Falco Capital, we do that too, because we are looking for investing into young companies, entrepreneurs. So we need to know who they are. We know the product, we see the vision, we can see the numbers on the spreadsheets, but who are the people that are ultimately driving this, who we are partnering up with? And, you know, to ascertain what is their subconscious driving force or the triggers that will then ultimately, determine our success in the work relationship, in the scaling potential, and in the overall entity. And that is very hard. And let me just ask you, because it's very hard. So, but you have a mining system, and we're not talking about cryptocurrencies. It's about, you know, give us a couple of examples, Kathy, if you may, where you came into a organization that you clearly saw was broken. They must have called you because they knew something was iffy, was up. How do you mine for these deep beliefs if there is resistance, especially amongst the people that don't want to admit, no, I'm not broken. Who do you think you are? And, you know, that are so paralyzed by fear, so convinced that they are not broken. How do you mine for it, though, in order to then do the Kintsugi?
I have a philosophy as I go into an organization that I'm their partner, and I go in not as an expert in anything. I go in as a facilitator of their learning. What I want to know from them is, I want to know first, I want to help them find their vision, and then I want to help them actually begin to identify their wounds and their strengths. And I realize that people really don't like assessments. You know, they get tired of this paper pencil thing. And so I really do have a lot of groups that I bring together, and that I have discussions so that they can look and talk to each other, and they can talk about the issues. And then I ask the question, so what do you want instead? What would you like instead? You know, and so we start talking about what they want instead, and how does that begin to then frame their vision? And what would you like instead of this? What would you like instead? So I had an organization where a lot of students with university were cheating. What do you want instead? You know, and how do you want it to be instead? And so lots and lots of students came together, and we had discussions, and I began to really create that snuggling, really create that connectivity, that working together, so that people began to understand that something was going to happen with that big chunk that they identified as cheating. So my philosophy is that hear people. So what you want to do is you want to look at the broken pieces. And what you want to do in looking at those broken with them, and you want them to talk about it, and then looking at those broken pieces through both an assessment that I use to identify that and their discussion, then I want them to begin to say, okay, what's so scary about that? So and how do you calm that fear, and what do you want instead? Let's talk about that. So you allow people to begin to look at that, and then once they begin to look at that, they said, well, we don't have to do that anymore. Mm-hmm. We have a choice. Mm-hmm. As we're going down this river of anxiety, we can go over there. We don't have to do this anymore. Then you begin to help them create a new plan. And the new plan is, what do you do instead? And so, and I believe that it's collaboration. It's all working together. You can't do it with a CEO. You can't do it with one person. That's why in my book I talk about leaderful teams. I believe everyone's a leader.
Yeah.
And I believe they lead in their areas. Let's bring them together and get them to work together to create what that looks like. That's my philosophy.
Yeah, and that recognition that everybody is their leader in their own turf, I think serves a lot of purpose. It gives empowerment. It gives, your entity as, okay, I have a place in the system, and everybody recognizes and respects that as well. So this entire potential fear that somebody is just trying to get rid of you, or is just, bullying you out of whatever your expertise is, can be mitigated. A couple of things, because again, the Japanese wabi-sabi philosophy is exactly that, recognizing that it is okay to make mistakes, to have flaws. And then also mushin is another one, this acceptance of change. So if I recognize something and I'm open to that process, I know that process is, at the end of the day, change. And that one habit will slowly but surely need to be replaced by another habit, which is hopefully then sinking into our subconscious and then driving our future behavior. Now, SCARS, Art of SCARS, is not just the name of your book, but SCARS is an acronym. Take us through that one as well. And because that is really, really nicely describing that process you're going through also with your clients.
So I discovered the SCARS process by actually going through building a Kintsugi vase. I decided that since I'm an artist as a pianist, that I could be an artist in making a Kintsugi vase. So I had a Kintsugi artist take me through the process. And the first thing she had me do was break the vase. Well, that was very distressing because you don't like to break anything. But then she had me lay it all out. And when I saw the pieces, big tears started rolling down my eyes, down my face. And I thought, why am I feeling like this? And because I was identifying with those pieces of that broken vase. So the first one is I was taking notes as I go. So the first S stands for stop the broken thoughts and feelings. It's stop it.
Just stop it. How do you stop? Is it the pause? It is that, because you are in your conscious, Dr. Daniel Amen, he calls them ants, the automatic negative thoughts that just torment you 90% of your day. Whatever you do, how do you stop them?
So what I do is I said, okay, and I learned so much from my teacher. Her name is Katie. Katie said, what else do those look like? I said, you mean besides broken pieces? And she said, what do they look like? I said, it looks like a puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
So what you do is you take that negative thought and you think, maybe this is giving me direction. Maybe this is giving me direction. So once you feel that trigger, once you feel that zing in your heart, once you feel that pressure, that brokenness, then say, well, what could this be telling me?
Mm-hmm.
And so I looked at it and I said, well, this could be telling me that it's a puzzle. And so I began to see it as a puzzle, and I began to change my mind frame. And there's states of mind. So my first thing was automatic. My automatic thing was, it's broken. I'm sad, I'm wounded. My second one is then when you get your critical mind and you say, okay, what else could this be?
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is puzzle. Okay, so then I said, okay, if this is a puzzle, what do I need to do next? So then she said, take a deep breath. And I'm used to doing that as a yoga instructor. Take a deep breath. And I have a saying that I do is you breathe in, and when you breathe in, you say, my path, and you breathe out and you say, it's clear.
Nice. I like that.
So I breathed in and I said, my path is clear. And so you courageously calm your fear.
Mm-hmm.
And so I noticed as I was doing this phase that I was calming my fear about the fact that it was never going to happen. So calm my fear, courageously calm your fear with my C. So stop the broken thought, courageously calm your fear. And then she said, now you can put it together. Well, my fear went
again.
again. And I said, but I don't know how to do that. And she said, may I help you? And I thought, oh my goodness, she's right here. Allow for connectivity. Allow for someone to come in and help you. So that was my A. Allow the connectivity of another human being, because they're all there waiting to help you. Don't struggle alone, snuggle. So she said, so first you clean the pieces. So gently, we cleaned the pieces, and she started helping me move them around. And she said, what would you look for first? And I said, well, I think I'd look for the biggest piece. That's right. And why would you do that? So together, we began to look at this together. The next thing that happens is she said, let's talk about how would you put it together? She said, let's create a plan. So we reinvented the vase. And she said, I'm going to show you how to use the glue, and we're going to reinvent the vase. So I reinvented, that's the R. I reinvented my action. I no longer saw it broken. I saw it as a puzzle. How was I going to put the puzzle together? Get the big piece in, put the glue on, begin to put it together. And then the hardest part, which I really wrote in as part of my thing, take the first step. Because she actually made me do it, glue it in. Well, it was scary because I knew once I had this gold on there and I put it in, it was done.
Yeah. Too precious to break again as well.
Too precious, but you have to take the first step. Yeah. And so SCAR stands for Stop the Broken Feelings and Thoughts. See, courageously then combat fear within you. Then allow connectivity with other people. Allow people to talk to you. Allow people to help you. And then together, collaboratively, you reinvent the plan and you take the first step.
Yes.
And then what you have to do, which is really critical, is you have to tell everybody, share your story. Because once you share your story, you begin to feel so empowered. You begin to feel beautiful. Because once I started telling my story and selling it for $0.25, I began to feel so empowered. So what happens is that if you follow SCARs, if you follow that model, if you follow it as an individual organization, you can fix anything one piece at a time. And that's the intent.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what I think is so important here is the sharing, or why I think the reinvention and sharing are absolutely critical, because you are transforming as a person. Okay. And this transformation, of course, you like yourself without the scar, without the hurt, without whatever before. And now you have to learn liking yourself redefined, reinvented. And the moment you speak it out, it becomes actually reality, because other people are being made aware, and you certainly cannot hide. So the SCAR process, I think it needs that publicity almost to really make it reality and to show yourself that you change. And then
yes, you do. It's so important. And one of the things I learned from Sadhguru is it's thoughts, then the feelings, then words.
Yes.
The words make it into your consciousness, and then those words turn to action. So you have to think about those four things. It goes from thoughts to feelings to the words you share with people, then you act. And then you can learn to fly.
No, that is absolutely it, and I don't know, last time we spoke, and I asked you a personal question. I said, okay, with age, the lines come, never mind the scars. Let's talk about the superficial stuff. You're like, oh my God. And not even the magic of MAC does the trick after a while. And my husband always says, they are not scars. They are your story. And this is exactly what you also say, is kind of like redefining it. Don't call it broken pieces, call it a puzzle. Don't call it, a line, call it a story you've got to tell. Because I got there because, I had a tough time, I had a great time, I was drinking or whatever, but it does tell us. And, it's a merit of whatever your life is, and it's a life expression. And just because we are mentioning Sadhguru, and maybe some of our viewers, Kathy, don't even know who Sadhguru is, but you quoted him in chapter 11 as well. And just to see, a little bit into his philosophy, and he's very much about, pleasure and trying to, not only feel that pleasure, but with that you transmit also. And he says, you quoted this one, and I love this one: the depth of your attention. So the focus, the conscious focus, okay? The depth of your attention determines the depth of your experience. So you focus on something, not multitasking, no iPhone, no kids in the back, no, oh my God, my nails are still drying, whatever. If your attention is profound, your experience of life is profound. And that quote, I quoted not only to introduce Sadhguru to, the other, whoever doesn't know, he's got over 9 million followers, so I think he's worthwhile following. Is also, you've been working with organizations for so many years, Kathy. You've seen the analog world and you're seeing the digital world. Has it become more difficult? Have the traumas become more deeply ingrained, or more in quality, more in quantity? Is it more chaotic these days? Or are people even more trying to hide because everybody seems to be so perfect?
That's really, really a great question. I think it's also sometimes it's a question about, I think there's a lot of complexity that's been introduced right now. So people are not only dealing with the issues that they used to deal with in the subconscious, which is their thoughts and their feelings and their habits and their beliefs, and in their consciousness about the way work happens, but the work changed. It went from, we're going to do accounting, this way, to, that's not the way we do it anymore. I mean, we went from school being in person to school being like this. It's not the way we do it anymore. So what happens is you have to think of the reciprocity between consciousness and culture. So if consciousness has gotten more complex, it's made our beliefs and our habits, we're more afraid, I believe. We're afraid because we don't know. And it's the false evidence appearing real. We don't know what we don't know. And so many of us don't understand. Well, I don't know who does. Maybe Apple and Google and, Microsoft understand how all this is coming together, through, the World Wide Web, through all of the things that the Internet of Things, how all this is coming together at the top through artificial intelligence. I think there's an excitement in all of us. It's all brought the complexity and the possibilities have brought an excitement to all of us, but there's also a fear for those of us who are afraid of it. And so I was going to say, I didn't say it, but I'm going to tell you what I didn't say. I was going to say it's generational, but I don't think that's true, because I think there's a lot of us who are older who really love the technology and who really love the opportunity that it brings us. And there's a lot of, so I think it's really more those who are willing to be open and learn. And so I think if I could put together one word, I would say learn. Learn. And as an organization, let me give you an example. I had a company that I was working with in Seattle, and the guy said, I really believe that what we've been doing for all of these hundreds of years, we build roads. I think it's not going to be roads anymore, because there's electric cars coming, there's flying cars coming, there's all kinds of things coming. Help us figure it out. So I helped them write a 50-year plan.
50. With this kind of velocity of technological change, Jesus.
Yes. So, but together, all of the organization and I, and the universities in the area, and the mayors in the area, we all came together and we said, what is the infrastructure going to look like in 50 years? And the main thing they said they want to focus on is water. Mm-hmm. And so I believe that if you calm the fear, and you're able to look out there and say, okay, how is our climate going to change? I'm not talking about the climate of the weather, but the way we do things. Mm-hmm. How is that going to change? And then let that not scare you in your subconscious, but let it energize you and begin to look at, like this company did, what do we need to focus on? Then they will begin to look at, how do we help clean water? How do we get more water? How do we deal with the fact that we're going to have less water? And one of the things they found, and it was just precious, is that one of the things we know is with electric cars, we're going to need fewer parking lots. Well, guess what? When the concrete comes up, there's more trees, we have more water. And so what I want to try to do with what I try to do with people is to say, be open to, don't let them scare you.
Mm-hmm.
But be open to the opportunities that come in the work that you do, so that your consciousness opens up to that. So even though I think there's more fear right now, I think there's more opportunity if we can help people calm the fear.
Yeah, I like that example very, very much, because in my mind, it falls into place with what you call in the book vision, mission, and value. If we have that vision, we know we need to kind of follow a certain mission because we believe in that megatrend. Let's just call it megatrend. Okay, water, for example. And that then creates in our everyday climate a certain value system. And there, I think the circle is nicely closed.
It's really close. Yes, I've helped them create that vision. And I've helped them say, okay, our mission is to protect the infrastructure of that area. And our vision happens to be water. Last time it was highways. And before that, they built the dam. So each time they change that vision about what is it we need now, because we're helping the infrastructure. And in the midst of all of that, our value is respect, it's trust, and it's responsibility to the community. So if you can get people to come together around that in an organization and snuggle and come together and connect, they can then, humans are so smart. We just don't understand how smart we are. And if we bring those brain cells together on how to get the work done, we can do anything.
Sorry, go ahead.
And they have to have the will. So that's the thing. Once you can move all of this out of there, all the junk, all the junk, and decide, okay, let's talk about this. Let's bring it into our awareness, into our consciousness. How are we going to deal with water?
Yeah.
They know how.
Yeah, and I think if you really put that kind of thought process on every kind of corporation, it needs to come from leadership, though, Kathy. I cannot see this as a grassroots movement in a big corporation, Microsoft, GE, whatever. I think that is a mentality, a mindset that needs to come from the top, where it is allowed to have fears, talk about it, and really dig where do they come from and are they substantiated, because you also define fear very nicely as false evidence appearing real. So, is that really true? Dr. Daniel Amen, he always says, okay, you've got these negative thoughts. Is it true? That's the past that distances you, pulls you out of the subconscious into conscience. What you were saying, just stop the negative thought and just think about it a moment. Okay. And that really needs to come from leadership. And with this kind of mindset, you have that inclusiveness because you allow people, not just skills that are bought in, and that at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, or maybe not, they're allowed to go back home and then come as their function back the next day.
Well, I think if I were to actually be able to say what are the main things that define leadership today, I would say that it's having that leaderful attitude and really understanding that everybody has their idea of how to do their piece of the work best. And so if they can understand that a leader is not being at the top,
it's a facilitator.
It's a facilitator. And if they can understand connectivity and allow connectivity, and help them be a leader, and allow the voice to raise, and allow those words to come forward and not be afraid of it. If the leader can do that, as well as helping, the leader also has the issue of they have to make sure he or she with their team have to make sure that the vision is set. Like the leader that invited me to say, we need a 50-year plan. I didn't get a call from the person in the field. I got a call from the leader. And he said, Kathy, let's create a 50-year plan. I said, Bob, are you kidding? And he said, no, 50 years, not 30, 50. Because I want us to go out there together, but I want everybody to go with us. So that's it. They need to have he or she needs to have that vision, not what it is, but they need to know they need one. And then together they create the vision, because we created that all together. We created the vision together. Then they need to know what work they're in. They're in the work of making the best infrastructure possible for the citizens. So once the leader can set the framework and then let everybody play in the framework and the connectivity, that's what leadership's about.
No, absolutely. And it's actually recognizing the now. Because if you think about it, what is really real? Real is that you and I are talking right now, which creates our future, and the past is already gone. Okay, so from that we can learn, and that should actually really only be the only, let's say, use of the past. Not to reminisce, not to be a victim, not to blah, 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 suffer it, but use it. But the now is exactly that the 50-year plan is going to map out, but every action we do right now, and only that consciousness that we need to look at the next 50 years creates the now to then...
It creates the now. And what you just said is so precious, because if you think about it, when you say the future, we don't need that, but think about that's our subconscious. Our subconscious was built on all of that, and it's out of date.
Yeah, totally.
It's totally out of date.
Reboot, everybody, just reboot.
So if those thoughts, if we can get those thoughts and feelings to come out and we hear them and we talk about them and we recreate them and we reinvent them, then we can go forward. But you gotta do that. You gotta reboot.
Yeah, you got to reboot. Okay, we have a couple of more questions from your experience, because fear is so vital. It really paralyzes us from the brain, from what we say, what we don't say, how we act. Have the fears changed? Are the fears different in today's world, you'd say, than, say, 10, 20 years ago, or pre-digital world? Can you see, or is it always more or less the same, because the human, at the end of the day, we're pretty much cavemen in our biology still? What would you say?
I think that the content of the fear has changed, but I don't think the driver of the fear has changed. The driver of the fear is survival. And we had that fear when we were cave women. And there was a tiger chasing us. And we were going to survive. You know, whatever it took, we were going to fight, take him on, or just stand there and hope he didn't see me. I mean, we were going to survive. So we learned, it's in our DNA. We learned how to survive. But survival is different today.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a tiger. You know, it's the internet. You know, it's the artificial intelligence. It's the, what are we going to do about water? You know, it's all of those new things that have come on, but it's the same thing. It's we want to survive. And so what we want to do is not only survive, but guess what? The cave woman also wanted to do was thrive. Yeah. We wouldn't be here unless they had done that. So it's the same motive. We want to survive and we want to thrive, but all those complexities have really changed the content. So we have to, that's the hard part about the habits, because it'll feel like I'm not going to survive this. And it's like my dad died, you know, and when my friend upset me, I thought, well, it's like my dad. It has nothing to do with that. But it felt the same.
Yeah.
It felt like she disappeared in my life because she hurt me. Like my dad hurt me when he left. But again, it had nothing to do with any of that. Mm-hmm. It's false evidence appearing real. So if I just learn that if I take those experiences and I translate them and then I talk about them, remember, it's thinking, feeling, talking, mm-hmm. words, and then action. So if I bring them into the consciousness, if I bring them into the light, then I can actually calm them down and I can take the next step. But until I bring them into the light, I'm always going to feel bad about the fact my dad died, because I felt like I couldn't survive. I couldn't survive without him.
Yeah.
So that's the way it's changed. So it's the translation is a little more difficult now.
No, yeah. And we struggle with it every single day. Because at least for me, on one hand, you still have that caveman DNA, okay? And because our prefrontal cortex is really the newest piece in our brain puzzle, and it didn't come with a manual, I don't know whether you've got a manual, but, you really kind of struggle to keep things level and kind of like conscious. And then you have the trauma that actually happened to you and wounded you, and epigenetically somehow, because of that emotional, fierceness, what happened to you just changed you. It just changed you.
It just grabs you. So what you have to do is release that grab. You have to let the feeling come out, and then through words and connectivity, change that. Because you can't, it's going back to what you said. I love what you said. You can't live in the past, but our subconscious does. It does. And so we have to translate. We have to reboot.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the hard part is we have to reboot it. Is one big piece at a time.
Yeah. Or little steps. I mean, this is
or one little step at a time.
That's exactly. This is what intrigues me so much about this wonderful conversation with you, Kathy, because you always is it big steps or is it tiny little steps? And you mentioned the word habit, and from Atomic Habits. I don't know if you read that book. I thought it was fantastic. It really is. It's the fine-tuning of every day, just introducing a little new behavior attached to something that is already part of us. So let's say brushing teeth. So I like to have shapely arms. So what do I do every time? I brush my teeth 3 times a day. Okay, so 3 times a day after each meal or whatever, I brush my teeth. But before I do that, I do dumbbells. Okay, so I do my sets of dumbbells to keep my, arms kind of decent, whatever the age. And I did it following Atomic Habits, saying, okay, what could I attach this to that I don't have to go to the gym every time? It's only once a day, or whatever. And that works. So it's kind of the fine adjustment, which then at the end of the day sums up to an evolution and the thriving that you were saying. And that counteracts that big bang that happened to us. In terms of a trauma or a wound that just was ripped into us. And
it just takes it down. It takes all the energy out of it, and it just takes it apart, and it just goes away. It's beautiful. And I think what you just said about all those little habits, I like to think about it in terms of a spiral, like our DNA. Because once we finish with one, we start with the other one.
Ah, lovely. Okay.
So it's one little habit. Okay, then I'm going to go to this next little habit. And I'm going to go to this next little habit. But talking about brushing your teeth, my dentist just said, we have a new thing. We have a way to floss your teeth with water. Mm-hmm. And not floss, but we have a new water thing. And so I'm trying to get used to that. Well, my habit is, but now it's this. And I mean, it's really hard for people to do that. But I'm changing it a little at a time. So once a day, I'm going to go to 3 times a day. But once a day, I know that I'm going to use that.
That one.
And so it's that spiral. Okay, then I'm going to use this. Yes. It's just like your arms. And so I think if we understand that, it's just that we don't let the past lay in there. And because what happens is it lays in there and it gets rotten.
And it rots us. It rots us. And it keeps on rotting us. And it's, also, again, was it Sadhguru who said, every day, just ask yourself, what am I going to invest this one life in? Just that one question in the morning goes like, okay, do I invest it into drinking and smoking and moping about or complaining all day? Or am I investing it into me, trying to share, trying to make somebody, a difference to somebody else, reading a book, opening the mind, staying curious. And just that one question just shifts again the entire mindset where you're pulled into, hey, no. One life, as far as we know, even though I do believe in more than one, but still, just between you and I and the community, gives you a different kind of charge and motivation.
Mm-hmm. It gives you a vision.
It gives you a vision. Yes.
And see, I don't believe any of us can really exist unless we have something to pull toward.
Yes.
And once you say, what can I invest this one life in? Even though you don't know what it looks like, you're going there.
Absolutely.
Because without it, you're just here. And you're stuck in that, a lot of those rotten things that happen to you that have turned not so good anymore.
Yes. Yes. Last question.
Okay.
Get ready for it. So what
I wish it was 8 hours long. This is great.
We can continue. We can continue. I'd love that. Well, I have you back sometime very, very soon. And when I'm over at the East Coast, I'm going to give you a bell and we're going to have you live.
That'd be wonderful.
Thank you. Last question. So, knowing what you know now, with all the experiences you've had with the different people, organizations in your life, what would you say, the 3 key things you'd say to your 16-year-old self today?
I think the first thing I would say to myself is, pay attention to the universe.
Mm-hmm.
Pay attention to those signals. Pay attention to what you're hearing. Pay attention to whether it brings you love or whether it brings you pain. Pay attention to that, because that's going to help guide you. That's number one. Then the second one I would say is, there's no wound that's too big to overcome. You can always heal.
Mm-hmm.
And the third one is something that I've learned over time, and that is, however bad you feel today, it's not going to last. Not if you look forward and say, it's about love for me. And once you get that vision, once you look forward to loving yourself and loving others and loving your community, loving the fact that we've been allowed to be here in this wonderful state, I would say always just know that it won't last. Be soft with yourself, and know that you feel bad that day. But
it's okay. And that it's okay to feel okay. Not so.
It's okay. It's okay, Kathy. It's okay, Kathy Jan. That's what I call my subconscious. Mm-hmm. It's okay. You can feel bad today, but we're going to get better.
That's beautiful. That's very, very beautiful. No, this is absolutely, yeah. No, thank you. I love it. And in order to conclude our conversation, I want to finish with a quote, which is really in the introduction by Edward Demings. It would be better if everyone worked together as a system with the aim for everybody to win. And I think this is really not only something that one says, of course we want to all snuggle, but it's about how. And if we want to know about how to get there, from deep down, literally, the iceberg, the main part, to the actions you take because A, you had the thoughts, B, you had the words, and then you had the actions. That's what you find out in The Art of Scars by Kathy J. Hagler. Dr. Kathy J. Hagler. Kathy, wonderful. You're awesome. Thank you so much for this pivotal book, for this fantastic conversation. Love it.
Thank you. You're a joy. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you. And thank you, my dear Mentoring TV community. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did to speak to Kathy about this fabulous book, Art of Scars. It just came out September 2021. I enjoyed it. I had a lot more stickers here, I can tell you that much, but it would have really literally taken 8 hours to go through every single point that I thought was pivotal. So thanks again. And I hope to see you soon back here on Mentoring TV. Stay curious. Bye.